In the unforgiving mountains of Afghanistan, where the thin air makes every breath a struggle and visibility can change from crystal clear to zero in seconds, Staff Sergeant Elena Kozlova crouched behind her Barrett M82A1 rifle, staring through her scope at what seemed impossible. 2.5 miles away, 4,400 yards to be exact, 3 high-value enemy commanders were conducting what intelligence had confirmed was a planning session for a major attack on Allied forces. The distance was so extreme that she could barely make out human shapes without her scope's maximum magnification. "Negative, Viper 1, crackled the voice of Colonel Henderson through her earpiece. "That shot is beyond effective range. Fall back to designated extraction point." The doubt in his voice was unmistakable. Elena had heard that tone before, the same skepticism she'd faced throughout her military career, the same questioning of her abilities that had followed her, from basic training through sniper school and into some of the most dangerous missions. In the Middle East. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. Elena pressed her eye closer to the scope, her breathing steady despite the adrenaline coursing through her veins. The wind was relatively calm, a rare blessing in these mountains, but at 2.5 miles, even the slightest breeze could send a bullet yards off target. She'd spent the last 6 hours calculating wind speed, temperature, humidity, and the bullet drop that would occur over such an extraordinary distance. Her spotting partner, Corporal Mike Torres, lay beside her with his own scope, feeding her real-time environmental data. "Winds holding steady at 3 miles per hour northwest," Torres whispered. "Temperatures dropped 2 degrees in the last hour. You sure about this calculation?" Elena had always been different from other snipers. While they relied heavily on ballistic computers and pre-calculated dope cards, she had an almost supernatural ability to read environmental conditions and make mental calculations that most marksmen couldn't comprehend. Her instructors at sniper school had called it intuitive ballistics, a rare gift that couldn't be taught, only refined through countless hours of practice and an almost obsessive understanding of physics. The 3 targets were conducting their meeting in what they believed was complete safety. Intelligence reports indicated these weren't just any enemy fighters. They were high-level commanders responsible for coordinating attacks that had killed dozens of coalition forces over the past 6 months. Commander Rashid Ahmad, known for his expertise in IED placement and ambush tactics. Commander Hassan Qureshi, whose suicide bombing networks had terrorized civilian populations. And Commander Malik Dostum, a former military officer who had turned his training against coalition forces with devastating effectiveness. "Command, this is Viper 1, Elena spoke into her radio, her voice calm and professional. "I have clear sight lines on all 3 targets. Environmental conditions are favorable. Requesting permission to engage." The silence that followed felt eternal. Elena knew what they were thinking back at headquarters, that a 2.5-mile shot was beyond the realm of possibility, that she was letting ambition override good judgment. The longest confirmed sniper kill in military history was just over 2.2 miles, and that had been achieved under ideal conditions with multiple shots. What Elena was proposing seemed to defy the laws of physics. Colonel Henderson's voice finally returned. "Viper 1. You are authorized to attempt 1 shot. If you miss, extract immediately. We cannot risk your position being compromised. 1 shot." That's all she would get. At this distance, the bullet would take over 6 seconds to reach its target, an eternity in combat terms. The enemy commanders could move, duck for cover, or simply finish their meeting and disappear. Elena had trained for moments like this her entire career, but the pressure had never been quite this intense. She adjusted her position slightly, feeling the familiar weight of the Barrett against her shoulder. This rifle had been her companion through dozens of missions. Its .50 caliber rounds capable of devastating accuracy when paired with her skill. She'd modified several components over the years, a custom trigger that broke at exactly 2.5 pounds, a specialized muzzle brake that reduced recoil and muzzle flash, and most importantly, hand-loaded ammunition that she'd carefully crafted for maximum consistency. Torres continued feeding her. Data: humidities at 23%. Barometric pressure holding steady. I'm reading no significant thermal layers between you and target. He paused, then added quietly, Elena, you know this is impossible, right? She smiled grimly without taking her eye from the scope. Impossible was a word that had followed her throughout her military career. Impossible for a woman from a small farming town in Montana to make it through Marine Corps sniper school. Impossible for someone of her size to effectively handle a Barrett M82. Impossible for her to achieve the accuracy records she'd set during training. Yet here she was, on a mountaintop in Afghanistan, about to attempt what many would consider the most difficult shot in military history. The three commanders were still visible through her scope, appearing as tiny figures in the distance. Elena began her breathing routine, a methodical process that slowed her heart rate and steadied her entire body. She'd practiced this routine thousands of times, in training and in combat, until it had become as natural as breathing itself. Elena's finger found the trigger, but she didn't apply pressure yet. At 2.5 miles, timing was everything. She needed to account for not just the bullet's flight time, but also the predictable movements of her targets. Intelligence had been observing this group for weeks, noting their patterns, their habits even. The way they positioned themselves during meetings. Through her scope, she could see Commander Ahmad gesturing animatedly, his movements following the same pattern she'd studied in reconnaissance footage. He would point toward the valley, then turn to face his companions, then look back toward the valley. The cycle took approximately 20 seconds. Commander Qureshi stood slightly behind and to the left, rarely moving except to nod or shake his head. Commander Dostum was the wild card. He paced, moved unpredictably, and would be the most difficult target. Command, I need 5 more minutes of observation, Elena radioed. I'm tracking target movement patterns. Colonel Henderson's response was sharp. Negative, Viper 1. You have local patrols approximately 15 minutes from your position. Take the shot or extract now. Elena felt the familiar surge of pressure, but she'd learned long ago to channel that energy into focus rather than anxiety. She began her mental calculations one final time. At 4,400 yards, her bullet would drop approximately 1,200 inches. That's 100 feet of bullet drop that she needed to compensate for. The 3-mile-per-hour crosswind would push the bullet roughly 48 inches to the right over that distance. Temperature and humidity would affect the air density, slightly increasing the bullet drop, but these were just the basic calculations. What separated Elena from other snipers was her ability to factor in variables that couldn't be found in any manual. The slight thermal updraft coming from the sun-heated rocks below would lift the bullet marginally. The rotation of the Earth, the Coriolis effect, would deflect the bullet by several inches over this distance. Even the curvature of the Earth itself became a factor at such extreme range. Torres watched through his spotting scope as Elena made microscopic adjustments to her rifle. You're really going to try this, aren't you? I'm not going to try, Elena replied, her voice steady. I'm going to make this shot. She'd been making impossible shots her entire career. Growing up on her family's ranch in Montana, she'd learned to shoot out of necessity, protecting livestock from predators, hunting for food, and simply because ammunition was cheaper than the entertainment options in their small town. Her father had been a Vietnam veteran who'd taught her that shooting wasn't just about pulling a trigger. It was about understanding physics, weather, and most importantly, understanding yourself. At age 12, Elena had made a shot that locals still talked about, a 800-yard shot on a wolf that had been terrorizing their sheep. Most adults couldn't have made that shot with a rifle, but Elena had done it with her father's old hunting rifle and iron sights. Word spread, and soon she was being invited to shooting competitions across the state. Military recruiters had first approached her during her senior year of high school. They'd heard about the small-town girl who was setting accuracy records at competitions, who could outshoot men twice her age and size. The Marine Corps' recruiter had been particularly persistent, promising that they could help her develop her natural talent into something extraordinary. Boot camp had been a shock. Not because of the physical demands. Elena was in excellent shape from ranch work, but because of the constant questioning of her abilities. Drill instructors who'd never seen a woman handle a rifle like she could. Fellow recruits who assumed she'd gotten by on lowered standards, and a military culture that wasn't quite ready for someone like her. Sniper school had been even worse. She was one of only 3 women in a class of 47, and the instructors made it clear that they expected her to wash out within the first week. The physical demands were extreme, carrying heavy equipment for miles, maintaining perfect shooting form while exhausted, and demonstrating the mental toughness required for the job. But Elena had persevered, not just graduating but setting several school records in the process. Her 1,000-yard group size, the measurement of how closely her shots clustered together, was the smallest in the school's history. Her cold bore accuracy, the ability to make a first shot without any warm-up shots, was legendary among her instructors. Now, lying on this Afghan mountainside, all of that training and natural ability was about to be tested at the ultimate level. Through her scope, she watched as Commander Ahmad began his familiar gesture sequence. She had perhaps 30 seconds before he would move again, and in that time, she needed to make the most important shot of her career. Elena's breathing slowed to the rhythm she'd practiced thousands of times. Her heart rate dropped as her body entered the almost meditative state that all great snipers learn to achieve. The world around her faded away, the radio chatter, Torres's whispered updates, even the awareness of enemy patrols closing in on their position. There was only the target, the rifle, and the shot. She applied the first stage of pressure to the trigger, feeling the familiar resistance. At this point, the slightest additional pressure would fire the rifle. Her crosshairs were centered on Commander Ahmad's chest, adjusted for the massive bullet drop and wind deflection she'd calculated. "Winds shifting slightly," Torres whispered urgently. 2 degrees more to the north. Elena made a microscopic adjustment, moving her aim point just a fraction of an inch. At 2.5 miles, that tiny movement would translate to several feet of difference at the target. The moment had arrived. Elena's breathing reached the natural pause between exhale and inhale, the moment when her body was most stable, when even her heartbeat wouldn't affect the rifle's position. Through her scope, she could see Commander Ahmad in the middle of his gesture, his body position exactly where her calculations predicted it would be. Time seemed to slow as Elena applied the final pressure to the trigger. The Barrett's firing mechanism released with its characteristic sharp crack, and the massive .50 caliber bullet began its journey across the Afghan landscape. The recoil was substantial, even with the rifle's advanced muzzle brake, but Elena rode it expertly, never losing sight of her target through the scope. 6.5 seconds. That's how long the bullet would take to travel 2.5 miles. In those eternal seconds, Elena tracked the 3 commanders through her scope, watching as they continued their meeting, completely unaware that death was racing toward them at nearly 3,000 feet per second. Torres watched through his spotting scope, his own breath held as he waited for the impact. At this distance, they wouldn't hear the bullet's impact for several more seconds after it hit, if it hit. The silence was deafening as both soldiers waited for confirmation of what would either be the shot of a lifetime or a complete miss that would compromise their position. Then it happened. Commander Ahmad suddenly crumpled, his body dropping instantly to the ground. The massive .50 caliber bullet had struck him center mass, the impact so devastating that he was killed instantly. But Elena's shot had done something unprecedented, something that would be talked about in military circles for years to come. Bullet, after traveling 2.5 miles and striking Commander Ahmad, had retained enough energy to continue through his body and strike Commander Qureshi, who had been standing directly behind him. The second impact was equally lethal, dropping Qureshi beside his fallen comrade. But the bullet wasn't finished. Commander Dostum, who had been standing to the side of the other two, was struck by bullet fragments and spalling from the impact. Sight. While not directly hit by the main projectile, the secondary effects were severe enough to incapacitate him fatally. In a matter of milliseconds, Elena's single shot had eliminated all 3 high-value targets. "Jesus Christ," Torres whispered, his voice filled with awe and disbelief. "Elena, you got all 3 of them, all 3. The radio crackled to life with urgent voices from headquarters. "Viper 1, report. We're showing massive infrared signatures at the target location. What's your status?" Elena remained calm, her training taking over even in this moment of unprecedented success. "Command, this is Viper 1. Single shot fired. All 3 targets are down. Repeat, all 3 high-value targets have been eliminated with 1 shot." The silence that followed was even longer than before. Elena could imagine the chaos at headquarters as officers tried to process what she'd just reported. A single shot eliminating 3 targets at 2.5 miles wasn't just unlikely, it should have been impossible. "Viper 1, confirm your last transmission. Did you say all 3 targets are down from 1 shot?" "Affirmative, Command. Single .50 caliber round, all 3 targets eliminated. We need immediate extraction. Local patrols are still inbound to our position." Torres was already packing their equipment, his movements quick and practiced despite his amazement at what he'd just witnessed. "Elena, how did you know? How did you know the bullet would go through all 3 of them?" Elena was breaking down, her rifle with the smooth efficiency of countless repetitions. "I didn't," she admitted. "I was aiming for Ahmad, hoping to get at least 1 confirmed kill. The alignment of the other 2 was just that incredible luck." But even as she said it, Elena knew it wasn't entirely true. She had noticed the positioning of all 3 commanders during her observation period. Some part of her mind, the same intuitive understanding that allowed her to make impossible calculations, had recognized the potential for multiple targets. She hadn't consciously planned for it, but her subconscious had positioned the shot to maximize the possibility. This was what separated truly exceptional snipers from merely good ones. It wasn't just about technical skill or equipment. It was about an almost supernatural ability to read situations, to see possibilities that others missed, and to trust instincts developed through years of training and experience. The extraction helicopter was already inbound, its rotors beating a familiar rhythm as it approached their position. Elena and Torres moved quickly but carefully down the mountainside, carrying their equipment and maintaining awareness of potential threats. The enemy patrols that had been closing in on their position were likely in chaos now, trying to understand what had happened to their commanders. As they reached the extraction point, Elena reflected on what had just occurred. This shot would certainly be investigated, analyzed, and likely become part of military legend. But for her, it was simply the culmination of a lifetime of training, natural ability, and unwavering determination to prove that she belonged among the elite snipers of the world. The helicopter touched down in a whirlwind of dust and noise. As Elena and Torres climbed aboard, the crew chief looked at them with obvious curiosity. Word was already spreading through military channels about the impossible shot that had just taken place. "Is it true?" the crew chief shouted over the rotor noise. "Did you really take out 3 targets with 1 shot at over 2 miles?" Elena strapped herself in and closed her eyes as the helicopter lifted off. "You'll have to ask the after-action report," she replied, but she couldn't suppress a small smile. She had just accomplished something that would redefine what was considered possible in the world of military sniping. Back at Forward Operating Base Shank, the news of Elena's impossible shot spread like wildfire. Officers who had initially dismissed her mission as too ambitious were now scrambling to understand exactly what had happened on that mountainside. The ballistics team was called in immediately to analyze the shot, while intelligence officers worked to confirm the identities of the eliminated targets. Captain Sarah Mitchell, the base's senior ballistics officer, had seen a lot of impressive shooting during her 15-year career, but what Elena claimed to have accomplished defied everything she knew about long-range marksmanship. "Show me the calculations," she demanded as Elena sat across from her in the debriefing room. Elena pulled out her weathered notebook, the same one she'd carried through dozens of missions. The pages were filled with her handwritten calculations, sketches of wind patterns, and detailed environmental observations. Captain Mitchell studied the numbers with growing amazement. "You calculated for Coriolis effect at this distance," Mitchell noted, her voice betraying her surprise. "Most snipers don't even consider that until you're talking about intercontinental ballistic missiles. At 2.5 miles, the Earth's rotation becomes a factor," Elena explained matter-of-factly. "The bullet's flight time is long enough that the target actually moves relative to where I aimed due to the planet's rotation. It's only about 4 inches of deflection, but 4 inches at that distance is the difference between a hit and a complete miss." The investigation into Elena's shot would take several days, but the immediate impact was undeniable. Intelligence confirmed that all 3 high-value targets had indeed been eliminated, and the enemy's planned offensive had been thrown into complete disarray. Cell phone intercepts revealed confusion and panic among enemy forces as they tried to understand how 3 of their most protected commanders had been killed simultaneously. Colonel Henderson, who had expressed such doubt about the mission, was now facing his own crisis of understanding. He'd commanded some of the finest snipers in the military, but he'd never seen anything like what Elena had accomplished. During her individual debriefing, he struggled to reconcile his military experience with what the evidence clearly showed. "Staff. Sergeant Kozlova," he began formally, "I need you to walk me through this shot step by step. Leave nothing out." Elena spent the next 2 hours explaining every aspect of her preparation, calculation, and execution. She described how she'd studied the targets for hours before taking the shot, learning their movement patterns and predicting where they would be when her bullet arrived. She detailed her environmental calculations, her ammunition selection, and even her mental state during the shot. "The most critical factor wasn't the distance," Elena explained. "It was patience. I had to wait for the perfect moment when all the variables aligned: wind conditions, target positioning, my own physical and mental state. At that distance, you don't get a second chance." What impressed Colonel Henderson most wasn't just the technical aspects of the shot, but Elena's calm, analytical approach to what should have been an impossible situation. She spoke about the 2.5-mile shot with the same professional demeanor that other snipers used to describe routine 600-yard engagements. Meanwhile, Torres was being debriefed by the intelligence team about his observations of the shot. As Elena's spotter, his testimony would be crucial in validating what had occurred. "I've worked with a lot of snipers," Torres told Major Williams, the intelligence officer conducting his debriefing. "But Elena operates on a different level. While I was still calculating wind speed and bullet drop, she was already factoring in things I'd never even heard of. It's like she can see physics in a way the rest of us can't." Torres described watching through his spotting scope as the bullet traveled toward its target, knowing that success or failure would be determined by calculations and instincts that were beyond his understanding. "When that bullet hit all 3 targets, I thought I was hallucinating. It wasn't just lucky, there was something almost supernatural about how perfectly everything aligned." The technical analysis of Elena's shot revealed details that would reshape military understanding of extreme long-range marksmanship. The bullet had indeed struck Commander Ahmad with devastating effect, but the angle and velocity had been precisely correct to ensure maximum penetration and continued travel. The positioning of the three commanders had created what ballistics experts would later describe as a perfect alignment, a 1 in a million chance that Elena had somehow anticipated and exploited. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel, it means a lot to us. Now back to the story. Dr. James Patterson, a civilian ballistics expert brought in to analyze the shot, was perhaps the most amazed of all the investigators. He'd spent decades studying bullet trajectories and had consulted on some of the most famous sniper shots in military history. But Elena's achievement was in a category by itself. What she accomplished shouldn't be possible with current technology and human capabilities. Dr. Patterson explained to the gathered officers. The margin for error at 2.5 miles is so small that even microscopic variations in ammunition manufacturing, air density, or rifle positioning should make this shot impossible. Yet the evidence clearly shows it happened exactly as she described. The investigation revealed that Elena had been carrying hand-loaded ammunition, bullets that she had personally manufactured to exact specifications. Each round was weighed to the nearest tenth of a grain, with powder charges measured to tolerances that exceeded military standards. Her meticulous attention to detail extended to every aspect of her equipment and preparation. Most snipers rely on factory ammunition or standard military loads, explained Sergeant First Class Rodriguez, the base's senior sniper instructor. Elena loads her own rounds because she understands that at extreme distances, tiny variations in bullet weight or powder charge can throw off your shot by feet. She's essentially creating custom ammunition for each mission. But it wasn't just Elena's technical expertise that impressed the investigators. It was her mental approach to extreme long-range shooting. She described entering an almost meditative state during the shot, where external distractions faded away and her entire focus narrowed to the target and the rifle. Military psychologists recognize this as an example of what they called flow state, a mental condition where performance reaches superhuman levels. As word of Elena's unprecedented shot reached higher levels of military command, requests began pouring in for detailed analysis and documentation. The Pentagon wanted a complete technical breakdown of how the shot was accomplished, while Special Operations commanders began inquiring about Elena's availability for future high-priority missions. General Patricia Hayes, commander of all sniper operations in the region, flew in personally to debrief Elena, a legendary sniper herself with over 30 confirmed kills during her active career. General Hayes had never seen anything that compared to what Elena had accomplished. "Staff Sergeant, I've been briefed on your shot, but I need to hear it directly from you," General Hayes said as she sat across from Elena in the secure briefing room. "What you've described challenges everything we thought we knew about the limits of human marksmanship." Elena repeated her account once again, but this time she found herself speaking to someone who truly understood the technical and mental challenges of extreme long-range shooting. General Hayes asked detailed questions about Elena's breathing technique, her trigger control, and most importantly, her mental state during the shot. "At what point did you know you were going to hit the target?" General Hayes asked. Elena considered the question carefully. "I didn't know I would hit until the moment I pulled the trigger. But I knew I had done everything correctly, all the calculations, all the preparation, all the mental focus. At that point, it was just physics and luck." "And the other two targets? Did you anticipate that the bullet would continue through multiple targets?" This was the question Elena had been asked repeatedly, and her answer remained consistent. "I noticed their positioning during my observation period. Some part of my mind registered the possibility, but I wasn't consciously planning for multiple targets. I was focused entirely on making sure I could hit Commander Ahmad." General Hayes nodded. recognizing the kind of intuitive awareness that separated truly exceptional snipers from merely skilled ones. In my experience, the best snipers develop an unconscious understanding of ballistics and tactics that goes beyond conscious calculation. You trusted instincts that you've developed through years of training and experience. The general's visit also brought news that would change Elena's career trajectory. Staff Sergeant Kozlova, you're being reassigned to a special projects unit. We want you to help develop new training protocols for extreme long-range marksmanship. And we're fast-tracking your promotion to Sergeant First Class. But the recognition came with a price. Elena's shot had attracted attention from intelligence agencies and special operations units who saw her unique abilities as a strategic asset. She would be deployed on increasingly dangerous missions, facing targets and challenges that would test even her extraordinary skills. Meanwhile, the impact of her successful mission was being felt throughout the region. The elimination of 3 high-level enemy commanders had disrupted several planned attacks and created a leadership vacuum that enemy forces were struggling to fill. Intelligence intercepts revealed that Elena's shot had become a source of fear and mythology among enemy fighters who couldn't understand how their most protected leaders had been killed from such an impossible distance. "They're calling her the Ghost of the Mountains," reported Captain Lisa Chun from the intelligence unit. Enemy communications show they're terrified of operating in any area where they might be vulnerable to long-range fire. Some groups have completely changed their operational patterns because of this single shot. The psychological impact of Elena's achievement extended beyond enemy forces. Coalition troops throughout the region had heard about the impossible shot, and morale had increased significantly. Soldiers who had been feeling overwhelmed by a seemingly endless conflict now had a story that proved their side had capabilities the enemy couldn't match. But for Elena herself, the attention was both gratifying and overwhelming. She had joined the military to serve her country and prove that she belonged among the elite, but she had never expected to become a legend within the special operations community. "I just want to do my job," she told Torres during one of their rare quiet moments at the base. "All this attention makes me uncomfortable. I'm a soldier, not a celebrity." Torres understood his partner's discomfort, but he also recognized the significance of what she had accomplished. "Elena, what you did on that mountain is going to change how the military thinks about long-range marksmanship. You've pushed the boundaries of what's possible." The technical analysis of Elena's shot was now complete, and the results were even more impressive than initially believed. The bullet had traveled at an average velocity of 2,750 feet per second, dropping over 100 feet during its flight and drifting 48 inches due to wind. The total flight time had been 6.47 seconds, nearly 7 seconds during which the bullet was subject to countless variables that could have thrown it off target. Dr. Patterson's final report concluded that Elena's shot represented a perfect storm of ideal conditions, exceptional skill, and remarkable luck. The probability of successfully hitting a human-sized target at 2.5 miles under field conditions with a single shot is approximately 1 in 50,000, he wrote. The probability of that same shot eliminating 3 targets is essentially incalculable. But what impressed the experts most wasn't the luck involved. It was Elena's ability to recognize and capitalize on the perfect moment when all variables aligned in her favor. This kind of situational awareness and split-second decision-making couldn't be taught in any training program. As Elena prepared for her next mission, she carried with her the weight of expectation that came with her newfound reputation. Military commanders now saw her as a strategic weapon capable of accomplishing the impossible, while enemy forces had put a substantial bounty on her head. The young woman from Montana, who had learned to shoot protecting her family's livestock, had become one of the most feared and respected snipers in military history. But her greatest challenges still lay ahead. in the unforgiving terrain of Afghanistan, where she would face enemies determined to prove that her legendary shot had been nothing more than extraordinary luck. 3 weeks after her historic shot, Elena found herself on another mountaintop, this time with a completely different set of challenges. Intelligence had identified a new high-value target commander, Halil Nazir, a bomb-making expert who had taken over operations after the elimination of the 3 previous commanders. Unlike her previous targets, Nazir was aware of Elena's capabilities and had taken extraordinary precautions to avoid long-range attacks. "This guy's smart," briefed Lieutenant Colonel Mason during the mission planning session. "He never stays in one location for more than 30 minutes. He surrounds himself with civilians whenever possible, and he started using buildings and terrain features to block potential sniper positions." Elena studied the intelligence photos and surveillance footage of her new target. Nazir was clearly a student of her previous mission. He had analyzed exactly how she had achieved her impossible shot and was taking steps to ensure it couldn't be repeated. "He's learned from our success," Elena observed. "But that also means he's predictable in his unpredictability. If I can understand his defensive patterns, I can find the vulnerabilities." Her new spotter was Staff Sergeant David Park, an experienced sniper in his own right who had requested to work with Elena despite the increased danger that came with her reputation. Enemy forces had placed a bounty on both her and any soldier working with her, making their missions exponentially more dangerous. "I've studied your shot from last month," Park admitted as they prepared their equipment. "I still don't understand how you made those calculations so quickly under pressure. Most snipers would need hours to plan a shot like that." Elena had been asked this question countless times during the past weeks, and she was still struggling to explain her decision-making process. "It's not that I calculate faster," she explained. "I think I process information differently. When I look at a shot, I see patterns and possibilities that become obvious once you understand the physics involved." Their current mission required a different approach entirely. Instead of the extreme long-range shot that had made her famous, Elena would need to demonstrate the full range of her sniper skills. Nazir's defensive tactics meant she would likely need to take a closer shot, but under much more challenging conditions. The intelligence team had identified 3 possible locations where Nazir might appear during the next 48 hours. Each location presented unique challenges. One was in a densely populated market area, another was near a school, and the third was in a heavily fortified compound with multiple escape routes. "Rules of engagement are strict," Lieutenant Colonel Mason emphasized. "No shots if there's any risk to civilians. No shots unless you have a clear confirmation of target identity. And absolutely no shots unless you're 100% certain of a clean kill." Elena understood the pressure she was under. Her previous success had raised expectations to impossible levels, while simultaneously making her job much more difficult. Every enemy fighter in the region now knew to watch for the telltale signs of sniper activity, and her reputation had made her a priority target for enemy counter-sniper teams. As they moved into position on their first night, Elena and Park encountered something they hadn't expected, evidence that enemy forces were actively hunting for them. Fresh footprints and communication equipment indicated that multiple teams were sweeping the area, looking for the legendary sniper who had achieved the impossible shot. "They're taking this personal," Park whispered as they observed enemy search patterns through their night vision equipment. "I count at least 3 separate teams conducting overlapping sweeps." Elena studied the enemy movements with professional interest. She had never been hunted so systematically before, and it represented a new type of challenge. "They're good," she admitted, "but they're also predictable. Military training creates patterns, even when you're trying to be unpredictable." Over the next 36 hours, Elena and Park played a deadly game of cat and mouse with enemy forces while waiting for their target to appear. They moved positions 6 times, always staying ahead of the search teams while maintaining surveillance on the potential target locations. The psychological pressure was intense. Elena was now carrying the weight of military legend while being actively hunted by enemies who understood her capabilities. Every decision carried enormous consequences, and there was no room for the kind of mistake that might be forgiven in a normal sniper mission. "Elena," Park whispered during their second night in position, "are you sure about this mission? We could call for extraction and wait for better intelligence." Elena considered the suggestion. The smart tactical decision would indeed be to extract and wait for more favorable conditions. But she also understood that her reputation was both an asset and a liability. If she backed down from this mission, it would signal to enemies that the legendary sniper could be intimidated. "Negative," she replied quietly. "We finish this mission. Nasir needs to be eliminated, and if we don't do it now, he'll just get better at avoiding us." On their third day in position, Elena's patience was finally rewarded. Intelligence intercepted communications indicating that Nasir would be meeting with subordinates at the market location, the most challenging of the 3 possible sites. Due to the civilian population and limited sight lines, Elena spent hours studying the market through her scope, identifying patterns in the crowd movement and potential shooting positions. The shot would need to be taken from much closer range than her famous 2.5-mile engagement, but the precision required would be even greater due to civilian presence. "I count 43 civilians in the immediate area," Park reported through his spotting scope. "Wind is variable due to the buildings creating thermal currents. Target identification is going to be extremely difficult in that crowd." Elena nodded, understanding that this mission would test different aspects of her skills. Instead of the extreme long-range marksmanship that had made her famous, she would need to demonstrate urban precision shooting under the most challenging conditions possible. As they prepared for what could be the most difficult shot of Elena's career, she realized that success would require more than just marksmanship. It would demand the same intuitive understanding of human behavior that had made her legendary shot possible. "I need to think like Nasir," Elena told Park as they studied the market layout one final time. "He's not just hiding among civilians, he's using their predictable behavior patterns as part of his defensive strategy." Elena spent the next hour observing the market through her scope, not looking for her target, but studying the rhythm of civilian life. She noted how vendors arranged their stalls, how customers moved through the space, and most importantly, how the natural flow of foot traffic created temporary corridors of movement. "There," she said finally. "Every 23 minutes, the crowd pattern shifts when the prayer call sounds from the nearby mosque. For about 90 seconds, the foot traffic moves in a predictable pattern that would force anyone in that area to move with the flow." Park looked at his watch. "Next prayer call is in 18 minutes. You think Nasir will be caught in that crowd movement?" Elena continued studying the patterns. "He has to be. He's been using the random movement of civilians as protection, but when the entire crowd moves in unison, he'll have to move with them or risk standing out. That's when he'll be vulnerable." The next 18 minutes felt like hours as Elena and Park maintained their position while enemy search teams continued hunting for them. Elena could see the professional skill of the hunters. They were systematically checking every possible sniper position with the thoroughness of trained counter-sniper specialists. 2 minutes until prayer call," Park whispered. "Enemy search team is getting close to our position. After you take this shot, we'll have maybe 3 minutes before they triangulate our location." Elena was already in her final shooting position, her breathing controlled and her mind focused on the shot sequence she would need to execute. Unlike her famous 2.5-mile shot, this engagement would require rapid target acquisition and immediate execution once the opportunity presented itself. The call to prayer echoed across the market, and Elena watched through her scope as the entire civilian population began moving in the practiced rhythm of daily religious observance. The random chaos of the marketplace transformed into organized streams of movement as people headed toward the mosque or paused for personal prayer. And there was Nazir, suddenly visible as the crowd around him moved in unison while he tried to maintain his position near a fruit vendor's stall. For the first time since Elena had been tracking him, he was clearly separated from the civilian population, not by distance, but by his different movement pattern. "I have him," Elena whispered. Clear shot, no civilian interference. Her rifle was already aligned, and Elena's crosshairs settled on Nazir's center mass. The distance was 387 yards, well within her capabilities, but she had perhaps 15 seconds before the crowd movement would once again provide him with human cover. Elena's trigger finger applied pressure in the smooth, controlled motion she had practiced thousands of times. The rifle fired with its familiar crack, and Elena tracked the bullet's impact through her scope. The shot was perfect. Nazir dropped instantly, eliminated by the sniper who had learned to read not just ballistics and weather, but human nature itself. "Target down," Elena reported calmly. "Confirmed kill on primary target. We need to move now." As Elena and Park began their extraction routine, she reflected on the lesson this mission had taught her. Technical marksmanship skills could make impossible shots possible, but understanding human behavior could make impossible situations manageable. It was a lesson that would serve her well in the increasingly dangerous missions that lay ahead. Elena's career. She realized that her legendary status had created an entirely new set of challenges. The enemy wasn't just trying to avoid her, they were actively trying to exploit her reputation against her. "This is psychological warfare," Elena murmured to Park as they observed the bustling market below. "Nazir chose this location specifically because he knows I won't take a shot that risks civilian casualties. He's using my own professional ethics against me." Through her scope, Elena could see the complexity of the situation unfolding. The market was filled with families, children, elderly vendors, and innocent people going about their daily lives, completely unaware that a deadly game was being played around them. Nazir had positioned himself, brilliantly surrounded by human shields, while conducting his business in plain sight. Intelligence had confirmed his identity through facial recognition technology, but Elena needed visual confirmation through her own scope before she could even consider taking a shot. The rules of engagement were absolutely clear: 100% target identification with zero risk to civilians. "Movement at target location," Park whispered urgently. "I see him. Northwest corner of the market, blue shirt, talking to two men near the fruit stand." Elena adjusted her scope and found the target. There was Nazir, exactly as described in the intelligence briefings. He was maintaining a casual appearance, shopping for fruit while conducting what was obviously a tactical discussion with his subordinates. The positioning was masterful. He was surrounded by innocent civilians on all sides, making any shot extremely dangerous. "Range to target?" Elena asked. 430 yards, Park calculated quickly. "Wind is swirling due to the buildings. I'm reading gusts from multiple directions. You've got maybe a 6-inch window between his position and the nearest civilian." Elena studied the situation through her scope, her mind automatically calculating angles, wind drift, and potential collateral damage. At 430 yards, this should have been a routine shot for someone of her abilities, but the presence of civilians made it exponentially more complex. "He's moving," Park reported. "Looks like he's finishing his conversation." Elena watched as Nazir began to move through the market, his path carefully chosen to maintain maximum civilian coverage. She realized that he wasn't just shopping. He was conducting a masterclass in counter-sniper tactics, using the crowd as both protection and camouflage. For 20 minutes, Elena tracked Nazir through her scope as he moved from vendor to vendor, never presenting a clear shot that wouldn't risk civilian casualties. The psychological pressure was immense. She had a confirmed high-value target in her sights, but her professional ethics prevented her from taking the shot. "Elena," Park whispered, "we're running out of time. Intelligence shows enemy counter-sniper. Teams are closing in on our position. We need to take the shot or extract." Elena continued tracking Nazir, looking for any opportunity where he might separate himself from the civilian population. Her reputation had been built on making impossible shots, but this situation required a different kind of impossibility, the patience to wait for the perfect moment that might never come. "There," Elena said suddenly. "He's moving toward the alley on the east side of the market." Through her scope, she could see Nazir breaking away from the main crowd, heading toward a narrow alley where he would be meeting another contact. For perhaps 30 seconds, he would be isolated from civilian presence, if Elena could time the shot perfectly. "Wind check," she requested. "Steady at 5 miles per hour, northeast direction," Park reported. "You'll have maybe a 20-second window when he enters that alley." Elena began her breathing routine, the same methodical process that had served her so well during her legendary 2.5-mile shot. But this time, the challenge wasn't extreme distance, it was extreme precision under time pressure, with the knowledge that enemy forces were closing in on their position. Through her scope, she watched as Nazir approached the alley entrance. She could see his contact waiting in the shadows, another high-value target that intelligence had been tracking for months. If she timed this correctly, she might be able to eliminate both targets with a single shot. "He's entering the alley," Park whispered. "You have your window." Elena's crosshairs settled on Nazir's chest as he moved into the narrow space between buildings. The civilian population was now safely behind walls and barriers, giving her the clear shot she had been waiting for. But she noticed something else. The positioning of the second target created an opportunity for another through-and-through shot, similar to her famous 3-target elimination. The irony wasn't lost on Elena. After weeks of being hunted because of her legendary long-range shot, she now had the opportunity to repeat the feat that had made her famous, but at close range and under completely different circumstances. "Second target is aligned," she whispered to Park. "I can take both with one shot." Elena's finger found the trigger as she tracked Nazir through the alley. The distance was less than 450 yards, a routine shot under normal circumstances, but the pressure was anything but routine. Enemy counter-sniper teams were searching for her, civilians were just meters away from her target, and the entire military community was watching to see if her previous success had been skill or luck. The moment arrived with crystalline clarity. Nazir paused in the alley to speak with his contact, their position in creating the perfect alignment for Elena's shot. Her breathing reached the natural pause. Her trigger finger applied the final pressure, and the rifle fired with its familiar sharp crack. The bullet's flight time at this distance was less than half a second, but Elena tracked its path through her scope with the same professional focus she had demonstrated during her legendary long-range shot. She watched as the projectile struck Nazir's center mass, the impact dropping him instantly before continuing through his body to strike the second target. The aftermath of Elena's second dual target elimination was immediate and chaotic. Both high-value targets had been neutralized with a single shot, but the confined space of the market alley meant that civilians were now aware that a sniper attack had occurred. Panic spread through the market as people realized what had happened. "Both targets down," Elena reported calmly into her radio. "Confirmed kills on primary and secondary targets. Civilian population is scattering. We need immediate extraction." Colonel Henderson's voice crackled through the radio with obvious amazement. "Viper 1, did you just say both targets eliminated with one shot? Again?" "Affirmative, Command. Single round, 2 confirmed kills. But we have enemy counter-sniper teams converging on our position and civilian panic in the target area. Request immediate extraction." Elena and Park began their practiced extraction routine. quickly breaking down their equipment while maintaining awareness of potential threats. The enemy forces that had been hunting them would now know their approximate position based on the sound of the rifle shot, giving them perhaps 10 minutes before hostile forces reached their location. Move, Park urged as they gathered their gear. Through his spotting scope, he could see armed figures already moving toward their position from multiple directions. Elena, we've got at least 3 teams closing in fast. Elena slung her rifle across her back and began the rapid descent from their sniper position. Her second impossible shot had been successful, but now they faced the challenge of escaping from an area that was swarming with enemy forces actively hunting for them. The extraction helicopter was still 15 minutes away, meaning Elena and Park would need to evade capture while moving to the pickup zone. This was a different kind of challenge than the precision marksmanship that had made Elena famous. Now she needed to demonstrate the infantry skills that were equally important for special operations snipers. "They're coordinating," Park observed, as they moved through the rocky terrain. "Professional counter-sniper tactics. These aren't just local fighters. They've brought in specialists specifically to hunt us." Elena had expected this development. Her reputation had made her a strategic target, and she knew that enemy forces would eventually deploy their best assets to eliminate the sniper who had achieved the impossible. The fact that she had now accomplished 2 separate multi-target eliminations would only increase their determination. As they moved toward the extraction point, Elena's mind was already analyzing the tactical situation. The enemy teams were using standard counter-sniper procedures surrounding the suspected firing position, establishing overwatch positions, and conducting systematic sweeps of potential escape routes. "They know what they're doing," Elena admitted, as they paused behind a rocky outcropping. "But they're still thinking like conventional military units. We need to do something they won't expect." Instead of heading directly toward the extraction point, Elena led Park on a circuitous route that took them deeper into enemy-controlled territory. It was a counterintuitive move that went against standard escape and evasion procedures, but Elena had recognized a flaw in the enemy's search pattern. "Elena, what are you doing?" Park whispered urgently. "The extraction point is the other direction. They're expecting us to run toward friendly territory," Elena explained as they moved carefully through a series of abandoned buildings. "But look at their search pattern. They've left a gap in their coverage because they assume we wouldn't go deeper into their area of operations." Elena's tactical instincts proved correct. By moving in the opposite direction from what the enemy expected, they were able to avoid the systematic sweeps and reach a position where they could observe the search teams without being detected. From their new vantage point, Elena and Park watched as dozens of enemy fighters searched the area where they should have been hiding. The sophistication of the search operation was impressive. These were clearly professional soldiers with counter-sniper training, not the irregular fighters they had faced in previous missions. "Command, this is Viper 1, Elena radioed quietly. "We have eyes on enemy search teams. Count approximately 40 hostiles conducting professional counter-sniper operations. These are not local fighters. Recommend intelligence analysis of enemy capabilities in this sector." The response came back immediately. "Viper 1, extraction helicopter is inbound to primary pickup zone. Can you reach the LZ?" Elena studied the terrain between their position and the extraction point. The enemy search teams had positioned themselves along all the obvious routes, but their focus on finding hiding snipers had created opportunities for movement that they hadn't anticipated. "Negative on primary LZ, Elena replied. "Enemy has it covered. Request extraction at secondary position in 30 minutes. Elena and Park began moving toward the alternate extraction point, using skills that went far beyond marksmanship. They moved with the patience and stealth that elite infantry units trained for years to develop, avoiding detection while navigating through terrain that was crawling with hostile forces. "You know," Park whispered as they waited for a patrol to pass, Most snipers never have to deal with this level of pursuit. Your reputation has made our job a lot more complicated." Elena smiled grimly. "The price of success," she replied. "But it also means we're having a significant impact on enemy operations. They wouldn't deploy this many resources to hunt us if we weren't hurting them." The extraction helicopter appeared on schedule, its pilots demonstrating the same level of skill that Elena brought to her marksmanship. They flew low and fast, using terrain features to mask their approach while avoiding the search teams that were still combing the area. As Elena and Park climbed aboard the helicopter, the crew chief looked at them with obvious respect. "Word is you did it again," he shouted over the rotor noise. "2 targets, 1 shot." Elena strapped herself in as the helicopter lifted off, leaving behind the chaos of the enemy search operation. "Just doing my job," she replied. But she couldn't deny the satisfaction of knowing that her second impossible shot had been just as successful as her first. The debriefing, following Elena's second multi-target elimination, was even more intense than the first. Military analysts were struggling to understand how a single sniper could consistently achieve what should have been impossible shots, while intelligence officers were trying to assess the strategic impact of her operations. "Staff Sergeant Kozlova," began General Hayes, who had flown in personally for this debriefing, "you've now accomplished 2 separate multi-target eliminations under completely different circumstances. The first was an extreme long-range shot. The second was a precision urban engagement. Both shots eliminated high-value targets that were considered nearly untouchable." Elena sat calmly across from the general, her notebook once again filled with detailed calculations and observations from the mission. "Ma'am, each situation required different skills and approaches. The common factor was patience and waiting for the moment when all variables aligned in our favor." General Hayes studied Elena with the analytical eye of someone who had spent decades in special operations. "What you're describing sounds almost supernatural. The ability to recognize these perfect moments and capitalize on them instantly isn't something we can teach in any training program." Dr. Patterson, the civilian ballistics expert, had been brought in again to analyze Elena's second impossible shot. His preliminary findings were even more puzzling than the first analysis. The urban engagement presents different challenges than the long-range shot, Dr. Patterson explained to the assembled officers. At 430 yards, the technical difficulty is much lower, but the precision required to thread a bullet through such a narrow corridor without risking civilian casualties is extraordinary. Add the factor of achieving the second kill with the same bullet, and we're looking at marksmanship that borders on the impossible. Colonel Henderson, who had initially doubted Elena's capabilities, was now one of her strongest advocates. "I think we need to stop analyzing these shots as separate incidents and start looking at the pattern." Staff Sergeant Kozlova has demonstrated an ability to assess complex tactical situations and find solutions that no one else sees. The strategic impact of Elena's 2 missions was becoming clear through intelligence reports. The elimination of 5 high-level enemy commanders in 2 separate engagements had created a leadership vacuum that enemy forces were struggling to fill. More importantly, the psychological impact was spreading throughout the region. Enemy communications show they're terrified of operating anywhere that might be vulnerable to long-range fire, reported Major Williams from the intelligence unit. Some groups have completely changed their operational patterns, while others are spending enormous resources on counter-sniper measures. Elena's reputation is becoming a strategic weapon in itself. But with success came increased danger. Intelligence had confirmed that multiple enemy organizations had placed substantial bounties on Elena's head, and specialized hunter-killer teams were being deployed specifically to eliminate her. The hunted had become the hunter, but she was also being hunted in return. "We're recommending that you be reassigned to a less exposed role," General Hayes informed Elena. Your value as a strategic asset is too important to risk in routine operations. Elena had expected this recommendation, but she wasn't prepared to accept it. Ma'am, with respect, my effectiveness comes from being in the field. If you take me out of operational roles, you lose the intelligence gathering and target identification capabilities that make these shots possible. It was a valid point that the command structure was struggling to address. Elena's success wasn't just about marksmanship, it was about her ability to read tactical situations, identify opportunities, and execute solutions under extreme pressure. These skills couldn't be replicated from a safe rear area position. There's another factor to consider, Elena continued. Every mission I complete successfully increases the psychological pressure on enemy forces. If I disappear from operations, they'll realize it was because their countermeasures were working. That could encourage them to return to more aggressive tactics. The debate over Elena's future assignments would continue for several days, but in the meantime, she was granted a brief leave period to rest and process the intense experiences of her recent missions. For the first time in months, she would have an opportunity to step back from the constant pressure of life or death. Decision-making. Elena spent her leave time in the quiet mountains of Montana, returning to the ranch where she had first learned to shoot. The familiar landscape and peaceful atmosphere provided a stark contrast to the war-torn mountains of Afghanistan, where she had achieved her legendary status. Her father, now in his 70s but still sharp and observant, listened quietly as Elena described her military experiences. He had been following news reports about his daughter's achievements, but hearing the details directly from her gave him a new understanding of what she had accomplished. You know, he said as they sat on the ranch porch watching the sunset, when you were 12 and made that 800-yard shot on the Wolf, I knew you had something special. But I never imagined it would lead to this. Elena appreciated the peaceful normalcy of ranch life, but she also found herself restless. The constant adrenaline and life-or-death decision-making of military operations had become part of her identity. She was a warrior, not a rancher, and she belonged in the field where her unique skills could make a difference. I have to go back, she told her father on the last day of her leave. This war isn't over, and there are still targets that need to be eliminated. If I can save coalition lives by taking impossible shots, then that's what I have to do. Her father nodded, understanding that his daughter had found her calling in one of the most dangerous professions in the world. Just promise me you'll be careful. Your reputation is making you a target, and even the best sniper can't account for every variable. Elena promised to be careful, but they both knew that her upcoming missions would be more dangerous than anything she had faced before. Enemy forces were now specifically hunting for her, and each success would only increase their determination to eliminate the legendary sniper who had achieved the impossible. Elena's return to Kontulka, Afghanistan marked the beginning of the most dangerous phase of her military career. Intelligence reports indicated that at least 3 separate enemy organizations had formed a coalition specifically to hunt and eliminate her. They had studied her previous missions, analyzed her tactics, and deployed their most skilled operatives to end the career of the sniper who had achieved the impossible. They call it Operation Ghost Hunter, briefed Lieutenant Colonel Mason as Elena reviewed intelligence on the enemy coalition. They've assembled counter-sniper specialists from multiple organizations, including some with formal military training. This isn't just about eliminating you, it's become a matter of pride and reputation for them. Elena studied the intelligence files with professional interest. The enemy had clearly learned from their previous failures, and they were now approaching her elimination with the same systematic methodology that she brought to her own missions. They're using my own tactics against me, Elena observed as she reviewed intercepts of enemy communications. Patient observation, detailed planning, and waiting for the perfect opportunity. I have to respect their professionalism, even though They're trying to kill me. Her new mission was perhaps the most challenging yet. Intelligence had identified a meeting of high-level enemy commanders who were planning coordinated attacks against multiple coalition bases. The meeting was scheduled to take place in a heavily fortified compound that had been specifically chosen for its defensive advantages against sniper attacks. "They've learned from your previous successes," explained Captain Mitchell during the tactical briefing. "The compound has no sight lines longer than 400 yards, multiple escape routes, and counter-sniper teams positioned at all potential firing positions. They're essentially daring you to come after them." Elena's new spotter was Master Sergeant Lisa Rodriguez, a veteran sniper instructor who had volunteered for the assignment, despite understanding the extreme dangers involved. Rodriguez had trained dozens of military snipers and was fascinated by the opportunity to work with someone who had redefined what was considered possible in their profession. "I've studied both of your impossible shots," Rodriguez admitted as they prepared their equipment. "I still can't figure out how you made those calculations so quickly under pressure. Most snipers would need computer assistance for the kind of ballistics work you do in your head." Elena appreciated working with someone who understood the technical aspects of extreme marksmanship, but she was also concerned about the increased danger that her reputation brought to anyone working with her. "Lisa, you understand that this mission has about a 50% chance of ending with us dead or captured, right?" Rodriguez smiled grimly. "Elena, I've been training snipers for 15 years. I've always wondered what it would be like to work with someone who operates at your level. If this mission kills me, at least I'll die learning from the best." The approach to their target required 3 days of careful movement through terrain that was actively patrolled by enemy hunter-killer teams. Elena and Rodriguez moved with extreme caution, using skills that went far beyond marksmanship to avoid detection while getting into position for their shot. "Movement at 2 o'clock, Rodriguez whispered on their second night. "Looks like a 4-man patrol with night vision equipment." Elena studied the enemy patrol through her scope, noting their professional movement patterns and sophisticated equipment. These weren't the irregular fighters they had faced in previous missions. These were trained soldiers with modern equipment and counter-sniper training. "They're good," Elena admitted as they watched the patrol pass within 50 yards of their position, "but they're still thinking like conventional military units. They're searching for sniper positions, but they're not thinking like snipers." Elena's insight proved accurate. The enemy patrols were conducting textbook counter-sniper sweeps, but their systematic approach created predictable patterns that could be exploited. By understanding how they thought, Elena and Rodriguez were able to stay one step ahead of the search teams. On the third day, they finally reached a position that offered a sight line to the target compound. The intelligence briefing had been accurate. The compound was a fortress designed specifically to defeat sniper attacks. But Elena had spent hours studying satellite imagery and had identified a single vulnerability that the defenders had overlooked. "There." Elena pointed to a narrow gap between 2 buildings. "For about 30 seconds every hour, when the guard rotation changes, there's a sight line to the main building where the meeting is scheduled to take place." Rodriguez studied the gap through her spotting scope. "Elena, that's maybe an 8-inch window at 380 yards. And you'll only get 1 shot before every enemy fighter in the compound knows your position." Elena was already calculating angles and environmental factors. The shot itself wasn't technically difficult. 380 yards was well within her capabilities. But the window of opportunity was so narrow that she would need to time her shot perfectly, and the consequences of missing would be immediate and deadly. "Intelligence confirms the meeting is starting in 2 hours, Rodriguez reported. "All high-value targets should be in the main building." Elena settled into her final firing position, beginning the mental preparation routine that had served her so well in previous missions. But this time, She knew that success or failure would be determined by split-second timing rather than extreme marksmanship skills. As she waited for the perfect moment, Elena reflected on the journey that had brought her to this point. From a ranch in Montana to the mountains of Afghanistan, from a young woman trying to prove herself to a legendary sniper whose reputation had changed the nature of warfare itself, the moment was approaching when she would either add another impossible shot to her legend or become another casualty in the ongoing conflict. Either way, she was exactly where she belonged, behind a rifle, facing impossible odds and ready to take the shot that no one else could make. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.